Russia is waving its nuclear club. Why now and why again? Let's talk about that. The second topic is Second Peace Summit. Who is in and who Ukraine wants to be in. And third topic is an interview on UATV English. Kurt Volker in our studio. These topics in more detail in a weekly episode with me, Enrique, and UATV English, doing our best to bring the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin may conduct his first nuclear tests since 1990 in response to the West's permission to use long-range missiles to strike Russia. Well, there is the possibility, of course, that Putin will decide to send some sort of nuclear message, whatever that means, such as testing a nuclear weapon in an attempt to intimidate the West, obviously, and this can be a sharp escalation, some say. Experts in the world are like, oh my God, Russian nuclear tests. It is again going to mark the violation of a number of treaties that Russia and the West have signed over the past decades. Again, oh yeah, so these are Western red lines, which Russia again violated and spits on them right now, openly. And what does the West do? Exactly what Putin wants. Gets intimidated. Western analysts fear that the Russian Federation may strike British drones and military aircraft near Russia, such as over the Black Sea, and possibly launch missiles at F-16 military aircraft equipped with Storm Shadows missiles at bases in Romania and Poland. Analysts, as usual, say one and the same thing. They warn the West it does not really know where Putin's red lines are. Experts say, I quote, allowing Ukraine to use Western weapons with the help of Western satellite imagery and Western military advisors is something that very closely infringes on Russia's vital interests. So experts think people are wrong when they say, well, nothing is going to happen, let's just do it. End of quote. Dear experts, correct me if I'm wrong, but Putin starts a war. Putin crosses each and every imaginable Western red line. Putin sets new set of his own Russian red lines not to be crossed by the West. Behind these red lines, Putin murders, rapes and burns Ukraine safely. Putin. Looks like Putin is a legit authority in the West, as he decides, obviously, for it how not to react to whatever he does. So you're absolutely right, experts. After we use Storm Shadows, something is going to happen, hopefully, finally. Something else, something different to what is already happening every day from the day 1, 24th February 2024. Our Ukrainian civilians, men, women and children, die every day. But that, I suppose, can be neglected, right, in your analytics, as it does not infringe Russia's vital interests. So we hope exactly on that, to infringe Russia's vital interests, to storm shadow them, to Taurus them, to burn them to ashes. You see, experts, to infringe Russia's vital interests is the whole idea behind Western weapons. After Russia infringed Europe's largest country's vital interests by annexing its land, murdering its people. After Kharkiv and Irpin and Bucha, with dead Ukrainians thrown at the streets as rubbish. If that would happen in Europe, would that be an infringement of Europe's vital interests, you think, experts? If you, God forbid, find your wives and your husbands raped or dead on the street of Vienna, for example, Berlin or Paris, is that an infringement of your vital interests or not? We did not start this war, Putin did. And expertise like yours, dear experts, is exactly what he needs now to make the world forget about it. With such experts like you, Ukraine would have lost this war 2.5 years ago. As instead of weapons, you would obviously gladly send Ukraine some water, to wash the blood off our streets. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced his desire to hold the Second Peace Summit in 2024 and express hope for the United States to support it. Bloomberg, citing its resources and sources, reported that Ukraine is seeking to hold the Second Peace Summit with Russia's participation before the US presidential election in November. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said that Ukraine expects to involve more than 150 countries, including representatives of the Russian Federation, in the Second Peace Summit. Yes, You just heard me right. It is very important, and we have spoken about this many times. We continue this work to involve representatives of Russia in second summit and sit them at this table to exclude manipulation and lies, end of quote, Shmihal emphasized. According to him, and actually the bare facts, in the case of direct negotiations with the Russians, they always deceive, they always manipulate, and this is why Ukraine plans to involve as many countries as possible, 150 countries planned to have in. The work is currently underway on 10 points of the peace formula of Zelensky in those groups of countries that have taken such initiative. Fulfillment of all these 10 points of the formula of peace based on the UN Charter is a very simple Ukrainian wish to our partners on how to end this war. Russia's clear desire is to freeze the front line, restore its army, continue their offensive, after some time just pass this war on to our children in Ukraine, to the next generation of Ukrainians. And we say no. We say yes to just peace, sovereignty, and the borders of Ukraine, our membership in the EU, our membership in NATO, full protection and preventing a war from happening again. If they go, I wonder, who is going to be sent by Russia to a second peace summit, you think? Medinsky? Shoigu? Putin? I suggest one thing. Whoever it is going to be, let us do the second peace summit in The Hague. You know, so in case Russia turns non-negotiable again, we just don't have to send them back. Kurt Volker, American diplomat, ex-permanent representative of the USA to NATO, director of the McCain Institute in Arizona, special representative of the United States State Department on Ukrainian affairs. Mr. Volker, hello.
Hi, great to be with you.
I have a lot of questions, but let's start with that. Ukraine, victory's plan for Ukraine. 4 points that Zelensky mentioned. What is this? Why 4? What are these points? Maybe you know, because I don't.
Well, I only know what President Zelensky has said publicly, which is not very much.
Yeah.
He indicated that he wants to present this plan privately to President Biden, to Vice President Harris, and also to former President Trump. I think we can anticipate there's going to be a military component, an economic component, a political component, and as he indicated, something about future structures as well, how to secure the peace for the future. We can sort of anticipate what this might be. My sense here is that he has probably been getting some pushback from the US about requests for long-range weapons and requests for additional assistance, because he's then told, well, what's the plan? What are you going to use this for? How does this fit together? And so he has now put together a plan to try to answer, here's what we're going to do. But that being said, I think the real answer to all of this is that the US does have to provide much more substantial support for Ukraine, particularly the long-range weapon systems, in order to change the playing field, to change the battlefield, so that it is more sustainable for Ukraine and less sustainable for Russia.
Amen to that. Well, you know, even at the beginning of this year, Republicans made a plan of Ukraine's victory. So how many plans are there? I mean, how many plans do we need? The thing is that, you know, it reminds me like around the world, but not in 80 days, in 2.5 years, everyone has a plan. China has a plan. Russia has a victory plan. So when and how the West is capable of actually, working out its plan, it's not even impossible.
Yeah, so you put your finger on it. The issue is not so much the lack of a plan as it is the lack of will, the lack of resolve coming from the US and Germany in particular. We need to demonstrate that we have the capability and the will to use it as long as necessary, as effectively as possible, so that we can convey to Vladimir Putin there is no way he will defeat Ukraine. If we were to do that, no matter how you package it, demonstrating that will and resolve is what's needed in order for Putin to then begin to change his calculations. But right now, Putin believes he can outlast Ukraine and the West, and therefore will keep fighting.
Well, at least, well, he acts just the way he is the authority in the West. Like what the West should react at and not react at whatever. I can spit on any rules, any imaginable rules, and we're just still deciding what's to do about what do we have to do about it. Weapons for Ukraine could be the answer. I'm just asking. Well, maybe that is the
Yeah.
answer. If we draw that was the analogy. So if we draw more analogies with the Second World War, then the Second Peace Summit is Tehran and then Yalta. Well, we're waiting and just for such conferences. What are we waiting for? Do you know? So why, you said the lack of resolve. Why? What do we need? I mean, Ukraine is still here. We've actually meticulously fulfilled all the promises that we made to the West. And West promised us weapons and gave us a weapon, but we're sitting on it, but we can't use it.
Yeah. You made the reference to the Tehran Peace Summit. Yalta was also part of that. One thing that is important for people to remember is that these were conferences among allied powers on the assumption of a defeated Germany. That's the kind of negotiation we actually should be having. Defeating Russia and then talking about what a peace looks like after Russia is defeated. That's the right kind of conversation. Unfortunately, that is not where we are today. Everyone is talking about negotiating with Russia, and Russia is not prepared to negotiate. That is what leads to then the conclusion, which you put into your question. We therefore need to provide the resources, the means, the will, the resolve for Ukraine to get to the point where Putin knows that he will not succeed, that his forces will be defeated. If we can get to that point, then it's worth looking at what a settlement would look like. Until then, it's all just paper, it's all just words. Putin is going to try to write the facts on the ground, and he has to be stopped.
It's more or less clear. I agree. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But we all know what must happen. But how can we do it? What should we, okay, what Ukraine should do or Ukraine can't do anything. We just need to sit and wait until the West just wakes up for a decision, for action.
Well, Ukraine is doing a lot. Let's not understate what Ukraine is doing. I think by opening the front in Kursk, that is changing a lot of the narrative that Putin had wanted to settle in. Putin wanted the world to think that this is an inevitable stalemate, that Russia will win. The Kursk invasion completely overturns that idea. I think Ukraine is fighting and is doing so very cleverly and very innovatively, developing the drones that they have, the naval drones, the air drones. These are all things that Ukraine can do to show to the West that it is worth supporting Ukraine and to show to Russia that this is not so easy. These are all things that Ukraine can and should do. But ultimately, as far as Western decision making goes, it's really up to us to make the case that not only are the risks of escalation by Russia overstated, the risks of inaction by the West are much greater. And if we fail to actually see Russia defeated in Ukraine and as quickly as possible, we're going to face much greater risk ourselves. That is not trickled through to decision makers in Washington or Berlin yet, but that is the argument that has to be made.
Okay, let's hope we're progressing on a proper way to have this decision. But do you personally believe, Mr. Volker, that this decision will happen and the West will allow Ukraine to use the weapons that we are again literally sitting on right now?
Yeah, the dynamics in the United States right now are slightly different from that. You have a President Biden that seems to be trapped by this fear of escalation. You have a White House that wants to avoid prioritizing Ukraine at the moment because they don't want to do anything to disrupt Kamala Harris's election campaign. You have President Trump, who doesn't want to be specific about what to do other than that he would end the war in a day. I tend to believe that if President Trump were elected, that he would want to increase a position of strength in order to negotiate with Putin, but he simply hasn't said much about it. So we really don't know where this is going. But none of this is as clear and direct as our conversation today about what actually needs to happen.
Looking at Kharkiv and looking at Kursk, operations that were actually not negotiated came as a surprise not only for Putin, but also for the West. So I'm going to ask you a provocative question. What if we use these weapons anyway, and we just wipe off the enemy's air bases off the face of the earth and see what happens in the West? What do you think will happen?
Well, the risk for Ukraine is that the resupply of weapons then stops. They were given to Ukraine with limitations. And if those limitations are not respected, then you run the risk that the US or other countries would not provide further weapons. That's dangerous for Ukraine. We are in this together. We need to fight together. It's important that the US gets a little bit more resolve, but it's very important that the US and Ukraine stick on the same side.
I agree. Again, it was just a provocation, you know. After all, I'm a journalist. I can't help myself. Sorry. So, another provocation. What if you will be a chief commander of Ukrainian armed forces? Would you, what would you say about Kursk? Would you?
Of course.
Yeah, Kursk and Kherson, of course. Well, I mean, would you send the Ukrainian army into Kursk if you would be Mr.
I think it was a very important strategic move. Of course, any move has both a benefit and a cost, and there is some cost in the front lines around Pokrovsk, no doubt. But the benefit to shaking up the decision making in Washington and in Berlin and in Moscow, that was needed. Without it, there was just a general assumption that Ukraine was going to face a slow erosion of its position on the front lines, just a war of attrition that Ukraine would lose. That is now no longer clear. In addition, when you talk about a settlement, until now, everyone was only talking about how much Ukraine gives up in order to get peace. Now it's more a matter of a trade, giving something back to Russia, Russia giving something up. It's more balanced than it would have been. So this was a very important thing to do. If I were in the shoes of Ukrainian commanders now, I'd be looking at two things. I'd be looking at where I can opportunistically do another Kursk, where I can find another weakness in Russia's position to exploit, to force them off balance. And secondly, I would be looking at how to use whatever systems I can get, long range, medium range, in order to disrupt the supply lines to Crimea. These are accessible with the long range weapons. It is needed in order to make the Russian forces there unsustainable. And that in turn will take off a lot of the pressure on the cities in southern and western Ukraine.
Well, what can I say? Take us to Moscow, Commander Volker. Thank you so very much. Yeah, well, it is always a pleasure and to have you. A lovely conversation, a lot of questions, but maybe next time. And don't forget to let me know personally when you're in Ukraine, so I'll be first there.
Okay. All right, will do. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
for the
very
interview.
much. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Kurt Volker was with us, diplomat, leading expert in U.S. foreign and national security policy, and maybe chief commander of Ukrainian armed forces. That is it. Thanks for watching me, Enrique, and UATV English. We did our best to deliver the whole truth in easy terms. For you, please like, subscribe, and comment in return. Your voice matters indeed, as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. Stay safe and tune for more. See you. Goodbye.